Welcome back. This is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Thomas, bringing you another edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Very exciting stuff. 1, 2, 3 are now in the books. Part 4 coming at you. Daniel Cormier, the UFC light heavyweight champion, has reportedly signed to fight at UFC 214 July 29th in Anaheim, California. As the UFC returns to Anaheim for the first time in a few years. But the question is, who will DC fight? When the question I will answer for you, the listeners, who should DC fight? Should it be either Jimmy Manuwa or should it be Jon Jones? Obviously, for those that follow me on Facebook, I might have spoiled this one for you. But let's just dissect it. So, Jimmy Manuwa was at the cage side at UFC 210, the event that I was in attendance for, in Buffalo. And Manuwa was sitting, interestingly enough, next to Dana White after the Cormier-Johnson fight ended. Manuwa felt the need to get closer to the cage and call out DC, as DC gave it some attention, and DC seemed to be giving more attention to the Manuwa fight than the prospect of him fighting Jon Jones, which I found to be very odd. Very, very odd. Considering that Jon Jones was the only man to defeat him, even though Jon Jones is currently suspended as of today until July 7th, I believe. The fact that he wouldn't even address the Jon Jones situation was kind of silly. Saying who, and then kind of giving Jimmy Manuwa some spotlight. I thought that was really weird. And I think it's weird in terms of the fact that Jon Jones is still training. It's not that he's not training, he just hasn't fought. So Jon Jones would be ready to fight July 29th. And Jon Jones, I'm assuming, wants to get his belt back. And I assumed that DC wants to redeem himself and get that victory, but it looked like DC wants to possibly keep his belt a little longer by giving Jimmy Manuwa some more attention, by letting Jimmy Manuwa take the reins of the moment that we were somewhat robbed of by DC, by letting Jimmy Manuwa take over that moment. And I want to go over something about Jimmy Manuwa. Jimmy Manuwa is not a bad fighter. Jimmy Manuwa has a record of 17-2, and he's been knocked out twice. Once by Alexander Gustafsson and once by Anthony Johnson. Gustafsson is not in the picture right now because he's fighting Glover Teixeira. I expect Gustafsson to get the W, get the win back, get back in the win column, and get, gain some steam in this upper echelon of the division. But, Anthony Johnson is now retired. He's coming off a victory over Ovince St. Preux, who gave Jon Jones a hard time. And he's giving Corey Anderson he gave Corey Anderson a tough time in that next fight, beating him in London in the first round back in March. So that was a UFC on Fight Pass event, I believe. So that wasn't even on TV. So I didn't even end up watching that. I don't have Fight Pass. So, Manuwa has done some decent things. He's got some decent wins. He beat Jan Blachowicz. But other than that, he hasn't really beaten anybody. Kyle Kingsbury back in 2012. Cyril Diabate, Ryan Jimmo, rest in peace. But Jimmo hurt his leg in that fight. So, really his best 2 wins are his last 2 wins. So, I guess if Dana White feels like he wants to give Manuwa a title shot, I guess. But is that the fight that you guys want to see? No. The fight that I want to see is Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier. The fight that we were supposed to get at UFC 200 that we did not see due to the fact that Jon Jones tested positive for a tainted supplement. So, give us that fight. Give us that fight July 29th. It's not on the International Fight Week card, obviously, but it's a couple weeks after that. That's fine. Basically, it'll be in August. Gives Jon Jones time to kind of do a little bit of promotion and stuff. They probably won't announce it for a little while, but the fact that the UFC has announced that DC has signed to fight again in July leads me to believe that it's going to be against Jimmy Manuwa and not John Jones, which is very, very odd. Very, very odd. Could the UFC be waiting for John Jones to come off his suspension until he can sign to fight? Are they going to wait until Jones can sign to fight? I don't know. But what I do know is it's odd that, if you're gonna sign to fight 3 months out, you usually know who your opponent is, and it can't be the guy that's suspended. So I'm assuming DC is going to fight Manuwa next, just based on that news. If we're having a tough time deciding on who should fight Daniel Cormier, take DC out of the picture and put Manuwa up against John Jones. Whoever wins that fight then takes on DC. But DC is not getting any younger. So it's not a good idea to have him sit out. And that's a scenario, that's another scenario, putting the guys up against each other. But I feel like that would do more harm than good, making the wait even longer for the Cormier-Jones fight. And I think that's the biggest fight that the UFC could put on right now, outside of Bisping versus GSP, which for whatever reason, it can't get the promotion that it deserves because there's no date. I don't know why the UFC won't just put it in September, like we all know it's going to be anyway. Just put it in September, just announce the date, put it out there so we know what date it's going to be on. I don't know what the holdup is. I'm hoping that there's nothing wrong with George's contract. Excuse me. Just had to get a quick drink of water. I'm hoping that, there's nothing wrong with GSP's, contract, but that could be the case. Only time will tell. But outside of Bisping and GSP, I think this is the best fight to put on, DC and Jones. Some would even say, and I wouldn't blame them, some would even say they'd rather see DC and Jones fight than Bisping and St. Pierre. I'm a big George St. Pierre fan. I'm a Michael Bisping fan as well. I think it's an awesome matchup. It's a cool matchup. It's fun. It's a matchup I didn't expect. So usually the matchups that you don't expect to happen oftentimes end up being, fun to speculate, fun to talk about. So, Jimmy Manuwa, I don't think he deserves the title shot, but Dana White is propping Jimmy Manuwa up more than what he should be. Coming off a win versus Corey Anderson, coming off a win versus Ovince St. Preux. Ovince St. Preux hasn't looked the same since that John Jones fight. So it's very tough, very, very tough to give much credit to Manuwa when he really hasn't fought any of the top guys outside of his last 2 fights, and the 2 losses on his record, one of which was to Rumble, one of which was to Gustafsson, and those 2 guys would probably beat him again if they were to rematch. So, Jimmy Manuwa is 37 years old. Cormier is getting up there in age. So definitely be a battle of older light heavyweights. John Jones is coming, though, and I guarantee you John Jones, regardless, will get his belt back. I think that the UFC doesn't want to give John Jones the positive reinforcement of giving him a title shot coming off a suspension. They felt burned by him at 200. They felt burned by him on several other occasions. So why reward that guy? But why possibly risk the chance at losing a fight like you did at UFC 210? They risked it. They took a big risk putting Cormier up against Rumble again. They'll be taking a risk again if they put Cormier up against Jimmy Manuwa. If Manuwa wins, the DC Jones fight is gone, and that fight will never happen. So I don't think Manuwa would be able to hold a candle to Daniel Cormier, but one punch is all it takes, and that could be the case. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that John Jones should be the next opponent for DC, or do you think Jimmy Manuwa should be the next opponent for DC? I'm going to go with Jones emphatically. Yes, his personal life does not have to do with anything fight-related once he is off that suspension. I think once the suspension is over, he's back in the game. Put him back in there for the UFC title. Who would you even put John Jones up against that people would pay to see? I don't really know. Shogun again? Gustafsson again if he beats Glover, or Glover again if Glover beats Gustafsson? I don't really see it. So it'll be very interesting to see. And the fact that I can break news like this is pretty awesome. I got a pretty good inside track on the UFC stuff, and especially NFL. But the UFC stuff, I really love this sport, and I hope that, the fact is, title shots are not guaranteed to the number one contender, and they haven't been for quite some time. So I think it's time now for, the UFC to do what's right in this instance, not give us a corny, phony matchup by giving Jimmy Manawa this title fight. Give us the real matchup that we want to see. Give us John Jones. Give us Daniel Cormier. Give us the promotional tour. The whole bit. And I don't know, maybe I'm onto something with this. Maybe they don't want to put John Jones in a fight with Daniel Cormier because it will not get the proper promotion that it deserves in that small of a window. It could be it. But you're taking a big chance. Another title defense for Daniel Cormier, which I assume will happen, versus Manawa, would definitely be huge because it would be 3 title defenses. And that is pretty remarkable for a guy at his age to be doing what he's doing, taking out Anthony Johnson once, taking him out twice, retiring Anthony Johnson, and beating Alexander Gustafsson more impressively than John Jones did, and then beating a guy that, I've kind of nitpicked him and said that he's not that great, but there is risk involved in fighting Jimmy Manawa. He's 17-2 with 15 wins via knockout. So he does have the knockout punch. He either knocks a guy out or gets knocked out. And it'll be very interesting to see what Jimmy Manawa would show up versus a guy like Daniel Cormier. I think Cormier's wrestling would be far too much for a guy like Manawa. That was the Thomas Take, guys. Take care. Guys and gals, thank you for tuning in. We got the draft week coming. I will be heading to Canton, Ohio this weekend. I can't wait. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on the Thomas Take Facebook page. Like it, follow it on Facebook and Instagram. And also tweet me at Thomas Takeover and download the Buffalo Sports Network app, the 24/7 live streaming radio app on BSN 716. This is Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take. Take care.